Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Disruptive Author. Today, I'm joined by Suzanne Culberg, who is an author and a coach. I'll let her tell you what sort of coach she is. Welcome, Suzanne. How are you going?
I am fabulous. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, awesome. You're a bit of a podcast junkie, can I say? You like getting
totally.
on podcasts? Yeah. And you've started your own?
I certainly have.
Awesome. What's the name of that?
Over It with Christanne and Suzanne.
Okay. And I've listened to Christanne, and I think my voice is very similar at different points. I've just thought, oh my God, did I turn the video over? Am I suddenly on one of my videos? And I've gone and had a look, and no, it's her talking. It's quite
your
bizarre.
Voice doppelganger. When you said that to me, I was like, oh my goodness, I've never thought about that, but it's totally a thing.
Yeah, it's a little bit strange. But moving on. So you love doing podcasting. You've got your own podcast. How about you tell everyone what you do?
So I am the Nope coach.
Yay,
yes,
the Nope coach.
NOPE. And I help folks learn to set boundaries and say no to others so they can say yes to themselves. Because so many of us inadvertently become people pleasers and do everything to keep the peace externally, and then internally end up in a whole bunch of behaviors that don't serve us, and spend or waste a lot of time trying to address these behaviors, like why do I stay up so late, or why do I overeat, or why do I never stick to the schedule, when really underneath it all, if you just say no to others and yes to yourself, you don't need these planners and blueprints and diets and, schedules that you're just never going to stick to. So there's so much freedom in that. And that's what I do.
Sounds amazing. Now, I've got to tell you, as I have a background in counselling, and something that I've observed, because I do observe a lot, something I've observed about coaches is people in general, we tend to teach what we needed to learn. Is there some background there for you?
Oh my goodness. Yes, we teach what we most need to know so that we can know it. I have been a premier people pleaser. I came across I've always known people pleasers as doormats, and yes, totally. But, I don't know if you can hear that. It was a very loud crack of thunder.
I think it's storm.
Big storm.
Did you just tell a fib?
I was going to say, no, I think there was something enlightening about this. So
there you go. That's another way of looking at it. That's cool.
I heard a term recently, the exploding doormat. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is even next level, because you say, yes to everybody else and you say no to yourself until you get to the point where you're just so resentful that you just blow up. Why don't you ever think about me? What about my needs? I do all this for you. And you just totally lose it. Yeah. And I was like, oh my goodness. Yes, that was my life for I don't know how long. And the smaller I tried to keep myself, mentally and emotionally, the bigger I got physically, because all that behavior would come out sideways for me in terms of overeating and, binging. So yes, there is a reason that I teach boundaries, is because I used to have none.
Okay. So tell us a little bit then about the transition from being that person to getting yourself sorted out and learning to put yourself, or just learning to give yourself permission before saying yes
self
to anyone
first.
else.
Put yourself first. Self first is not selfish. 100%.
Oh God, no! I think it's actually being responsible. Does that make sense? Because if you don't
they
care,
tell you on the aeroplane, put your own oxygen mask on, because if you're passed out, you can't help anyone else.
And worse than that, I just think in your own life, if you're not looking after yourself first and more than adequately, then someone else is going to have to look after you.
Yes.
So, better to do that for yourself first. And if we're all focused on that, then we'd all have plenty of energy to fill the gaps elsewhere where people need help. That's just my theory. But that transition, I guess what I'm looking for from you is that transition from realizing, okay, this isn't working for me. What is going to work? And then moving into that space of, I've really got something going here. How can I create something that will help someone else and form a business out of it? So what's that journey like for you?
For me, it was messy. Like, I'm nothing if not honest and transparent. And I think for many of us who do start a coaching business, it's because we are the person that we wish we'd had. It's like, I really wished I'd had a me so that I didn't have to go through this, A, alone, and B, with so many side quests. Oh, I don't have the shirt on today. I've got a shirt that says, I'm not procrastinating, I'm doing side quests.
Okay.
Because when you have very poor boundaries or no boundaries, often what we inadvertently do is we pendulum swing to having too strong a boundary. And
what I would call a barrier.
I was going to say, then you have a barrier or a barricade. And, you know, taking this back for the listeners, a boundary in the very simplest of definition is like a dividing line. So when we think it in terms of geography, like the boundary between my house and my neighbor's house, there is a boundary fence. And then the fence can have a gate in it. So you can open it and let people in or let people out. But when you don't have boundaries and then you set them up and make like this giant barricade, not only are you unable to let people in, but then you can't let yourself out. So you're not able to ask for help. Yes, you're isolated, you're alone, you're having to rely fully on yourself. And it's kind of really lonely. So then you pendulum between being lonely and doing everything on your own and having nobody, and then probably being equally lonely, but having all sorts of people rely on you and doing too much for everybody else, and not really finding any healthy middle ground where you're able to create the gate in the fence to allow people in and out. It's like to be able to choose what you allow in and choose, you know, when you allow yourself out. So in the beginning, and I think another thing too, for any listeners who are like, oh, I couldn't say no, like I don't want to disrupt the peace or whatever.
It's hard for some people,
When we become the exploding doormat, the reason it's hard is because we wait until way past the point where we sort of set the boundary and then we lose it. It's the same as if you don't eat. If you get inklings that you're actually physically hungry and you ignore it and you ignore it and you ignore it, often you can end up in binge town because your body's just beyond it. And then you're like, I've blown it now. And you just eat everything.
So it's an all or nothing mentality, isn't it?
It applies to so many things. How we do one thing is how we do most things. I don't fully agree with how we do one thing is how we do everything, but how we do one thing is how we do most things.
I don't agree with that either, but most I can get on board with, yes.
So if you have poor boundaries around your time, you probably have poor boundaries around, you know, many other things in your life. And so for me, it was kind of like first identifying I had needs, because somewhere along the way, we lose the fact that we have needs. I don't know if it's life transitions, you know, becoming a mother is one, or, you know, going out on your own, or we just we tend to swept along with what everybody else wants to do.
Yep.
And then it's kind of like advocating for them, because it can be easier to say, oh, I can't do that because my kids are too little, or because my husband works shift, or my husband worked FIFO for a while, so he was never home. Like there's always a reason that your needs can't get met.
Yeah. Yep.
And then it's kind of, there's just little things that really stood out for me. Like I was always the person to volunteer if anyone needed anything, but I would never ask for any help because I didn't want to be a burden. And I remember one of the first coaches I worked with was like, so let me get this straight, Suzanne, you would do anything for anyone else, but you'd never ask for anything because you don't want to be a burden. What does that say about the people that you're volunteering to help? And I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
Like, exactly. I think everybody's a burden unconsciously.
Yeah.
So it's just little things that start chipping away, and you kind of like, is this the life that I want to lead? Like I'd done all the things, as in graduated from uni, gotten married, had the kids, had the house, had the job. And I was like, it's outwardly got all the ticks, but inwardly it's like, is this all there is? So, and I thought the final frontier was my weight. I thought once I released the weight, because I used to weigh twice what I did now, like the weight will be the answer. And then I lost the weight and I was like, wow, it wasn't that. So then I was like, it must be money. Like I must need to have, you know, this amount of money in savings. And then when I get to that, I was like, oh, okay, it wasn't that either. So it's just really realizing the difference between living the life, like actually having the life that you desire, and living something that looks really good on paper, but inside you feel really kind of hollow.
And disconnected. Holy moly. So what you've just described to me really is a journey, a relationship to self.
Yes.
And just constantly looking within and just going, you know, how's this feel for me? Is this right for me? Is this working for me? Is this not working for me? Until you get to that place where more often than not, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but more often than not, when you do look within, you're saying, yes, I'm good with this. So you're saying no out there more often.
Yes.
But yes, in here, it's feeling good. I'm on the right track. This is good for me.
Yes. And the other thing too, sometimes when I talk about, you know, boundaries and saying no and saying yes, and you know, the difference between self first and selfish, there are obviously times I'm going to make accommodations. So like, say, for example, at the end of last year, my kids both, I was so proud, won an award at the assembly. So I'm an introvert. I don't really like going to things in person. I especially don't like sitting through, you know, 2.5 hours to see my kids on the stage for 30 seconds. But in that case, I would go, you know, I put up and go because I have that moment. But say you're like, hey, Suzanne, do you want to come and see like a horror movie? Like, no. Thanks so much for inviting me for the movies, Deborah. I don't do horror. Is there anything else showing that you'd like to see? Because so often we do put up and we do things that, you know, aren't aligned to us. And imagine if you keep asking me these horror movies and I keep saying yes, and then like 5 years from now, I'm like, I can't stand horror. You'd be like, why didn't you tell me years ago? Like, I keep inviting you because you kept like saying yes. Oh, you've got a story?
That exact
Share.
story was my auntie and I. We used to be like best friends. She's not with us anymore. But everywhere we would go, I would have Mentos. And I would say to her, do you want to do, I think it was Mentos. Do you want a Mentos? And she'd say no. And this went on for a couple of years. And then one day I did actually say to her, do you like them? And she said, no, I don't. All that time, I just kept asking. So then after that, I never asked her again, of course. Didn't take it personally. It all could have been good if she'd just said in the first place, yeah, I don't like them. Would have been fine.
I think there's so often we don't, like, we build foundations on something that is, this is the very foundation of people pleasing. It's like, do you want to do this? Well, I don't want to say no because I don't want to be rude, or I don't want her to think I don't like her, or, you know, I think she's a cool chick, but, you know, but if you say like, thanks so much for inviting me, I'm not really into that. What else? Like if you go to someone's house and they say, would you like a drink? And so often people end up consuming something that they don't like, sure, what have you got on offer? Like, you know, what is there? Like, open up a conversation rather than just saying, yeah, I'll drink coffee and then choking it down if you're not a coffee drinker, or, you know, anything like that.
Staying up all night because you're not used to it.
Yes, 100%. And I think, you know, so many of us, we are so afraid to say no to people, to close doors. We don't really realize that what actually closes the door is us saying yes and then getting to the point where we do explode. And there's so many other options available to us if we're just really clear with our communication.
Totally. All right. So how did you put all of that into a business? Tell us about that process.
Well, originally, so in 2017, I got fired. I wrote about that in my book. I don't know if you've got to that part yet.
How many times has being fired or being retrenched or whatever has been the beginning of something absolutely fantastic? So tell us all about it.
So yeah, I was fired, and I was actually writing my book at the time, and that was part of the reason the book got put on hold, because, you know, something like that at the moment it happens to you, it's big, it's encompassing, it's a huge thing in your life. And then 3 years later, when I picked the book back up, it's like a sentence and I was let go from my job or something. It was like a non-event.
I did read up to that bit, and you were like, you had all this stuff, and then you just looked at it and thought, well, it was just this. That's all.
And that's all it was. So anyway, I was like, at that time, going back to my job at that stage was an executive assistant, customer support, remote. And I had worked in government before, but I had 2 children, and getting them to daycare and then driving into the city, it was a nightmare. And so it's funny, literally the same afternoon that I get fired, my original coach that I'd been a client of sent me a Facebook message, said, hey, I'm doing a coach training. Have you ever considered this? I think you'd be an awesome coach. It's like, that's some serendipity for you right there.
Timing could not have been better.
So I signed up and I did my first certification there. And I'm not saying that coaching is an unregulated industry. So anyone listening to this, I know you're going to ask me later, one of my things in business, one of my advice would be start with what you have now. like, don't wait.
Yeah.
Because so often what
Come
happens
back.
is we go from entrepreneur, like wantrepreneur, and we start chasing all these pieces of paper. So anyway, I did a
to
coach training.
justify. We'll come back to that. Yeah. So that's a good point.
And I started a business as a weight loss mindset coach. So I was never interested in what people ate or how they exercised, but why they ate when they weren't hungry. Because if you're not physically hungry, food's never going to be the solution. I did that for just over 4 years. And then what I found...
Did you get much traction with that?
Pardon?
Did you get much traction with that? Like, did you attract...
Quite a bit. Yeah, I created a program called Why Wait. My program is still called Why Wait. I actually zoomed it out because over-consuming... So I've basically... What I found in hindsight is so many people are overweight because they overgive. So they say yes to others and no to themselves.
And
they
you can
do that
see a very
all day.
clear correlation there. Okay.
And so basically, if to pare this back, because it's funny, life's lived forward and then understood backwards.
Crazy.
Inhaling and exhaling are paired. You can't have one without the other. We understand that. Giving and receiving are the same. Overgiving is met with over-consuming. So if you're available for everybody else all the time and doing everything, then the way that you pair that is you stay up late, watch Netflix or whatever streaming service, read, trashy novels or whatever it is, eat. And then you focus on the next plan, like the next diet, the next plan, and the next thing. And it's like, it wasn't just eating though. Because what happens is when people stop overeating, they tend to put this over behavior into something else, overworking, over shopping, over drinking, gambling, and whatever. So basically my work now has evolved from just purely overeating into what is your over. So someone came to me and they're like, I'm interested in your work. I want to do Why Wait. I'm not overweight, but I overwork. And I'm like, you could give it a go. So I'm honest. I'm like, its main focus is overeating, but let's try it. So she did a round, and then someone else came and they were working on, they were like over shopping, overspending. And so the people who were coming to the program were really opening my eyes to, hang on, there's something deeper going on here. What is this void that we're avoiding? And that's when it changed from being purely about overeating. Like I still do cover that, but for so many of us who are chronic dieters, once we got our eating sorted out, we would then overspend, or then we would, something else. And that's how it evolved into what it is now, which is, boundary setting, self-care, people pleasing, that kind of thing.
So when did you figure that out? So I'm backtracking a bit now. So going back to your journey to figure this out, you mentioned like you like, I'll sort the weight out, and then you realize nuts, not that. And then you sort your money out, and then you realize it wasn't that. At what point did you go, oh, it's overgiving? And then I'm overcompensating.
I really only came to that in 2020, 2021. I was working with a marketing coach called Tad Hargrave from Marketing for Hippies. He's absolutely fabulous.
Okay.
And when I came to him, because, when you're niching down in business and when you're attracting clients, he has this way he speaks about it is like, you go to the harbor and you offer your boat. So your business is your boat. Yeah. So if you go down to the weight loss harbor and say, hey, I do weight loss, there's like 10,000 or 100,000 boats there. He's like, how are you going to stand out from all the other boats? And I was like, well, I do weight loss without dieting. He's like, okay, we've probably knocked off 100 boats, Yeah. And I was like, okay, we do weight loss mindset. And he's like, we've knocked off 100 more boats. Like, but what is it particularly about you and your journey? Like, what is it? So many, many hours and many tears and a lot of frustration of really getting deep into like, what is it about it? And I'd written my book and, reflecting on that, it's whenever I'd lost the weight, like I thought, this is it, I've been solved, but then something else would come up. And it's kind of like, it's from that work with him, the overgiving piece, the people pleasing piece that really started to come to the forefront, because it was like, when I don't need to stay up late or avoid or whatever, when I can just say, I'm not available for that. Like, it's not easy in the beginning, but, or thank you so much, but no. That's when I really started to notice that link. So my original business from there, we morphed into, what if you're overweight because you overgive? And, that was the work with him that I did there that I really saw that missing piece. And then the more that I spoke to that and the more that I coached that, the more that I realized that the over, hence my podcast being called Over It.
Over it. Yes, I thought that before.
Is very different depending on the person. And what many of us do is we never address the underlying cause. We just push it out. So if you're overeating currently and you go on a really strict diet regime, you might start over exercising. And some people will laugh and go, well, what a problem to have. That's how I injured my back. Got a lifelong back injury from over exercising.
And it's still a driven behavior. So there's no peace in being driven.
There is no peace. And you're always like, it's never enough. So on my desk here, I know this is podcast, but I'll show you because we're on video. I have this piece of fool's gold. Oh. And it's deliberately for when I am in that, because it still happens. It's like, once I have this solved, this will be the answer. And at the time of recording this, before we jumped on, I literally just sent an email to my list because I had a rage quit because I couldn't get some tech stuff sorted. And then I was like, is this really that big of a deal? Like, people are going to get the wrong thank you page. Does anybody really care? I'm over it.
Is anyone going to die is the one I always ask. Is anyone going to die?
Well, they're going to, some people might be confused, but, it's like letting go of these perfectionistic, procrastinated tendencies that we have and just being going, I'm doing my best. My best gets to get better, but this is enough for today. And then I can go hang out with my kids, go for a walk, read a book and whatever, and not be chained to overworking or overeating out of frustration or something like that.
Wow. So it sounds like that was a great exercise for you in business and personally, just looking for that thing that made you stand out in the harbour.
Yes, definitely. I recommend that for anybody in whatever it is, because we think we're unique in whatever it is we do. And but so is everyone else who does the same thing as us.
Totally. And I know, and I hear people, and I've said it myself over the years as well, what's different about you? And it's like, well, it's me. And that's lovely. And yes, that is true. But what does that mean to the person in front of you that's potentially going to spend some money with you? What does that mean to them? So how are you different? How are you unique? It's really important to understand that, isn't it?
Yes. And I think sometimes too, there is a certain level of safety in sameness and familiarity. Like growing up, we are, depending on the school, wearing uniforms, wear your hair like this, have your collar like this, all this sort of stuff. We are safe when we don't stand out. And in this particular exercise, like what is unique about you, that could be something that was exploited when you were younger or that you were teased about. Like I've got a dimple. And I don't know if I wrote about this in the book, but I was teased a lot about it when I was a kid. And I can literally get my tongue there to push it out so I don't look like I have a dimple because, that wasn't safe. And then my poor son, well, not poor because he actually owns his dimples. He's got such a stronger self-concept, must be partly because I'm his mother. He's got dimples on both sides. If I had that, I would have been in trouble because I only got one tongue.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So what I want to ask you now is, so you've identified how you're different. How are you shaking things up in that harbour?
I think there's something about being unafraid or unapologetic about the boat ride being a bit rocky. Like it's, instead of being like this, let's get on the cruise ship and hang out by the pool with, mimosas or whatever. I'm like, no, let's go on speedboat. Let's go hammer and tongs and spray water everywhere and, have fun doing it and then have a lot of fun resting too. Because I think so often we are sold things that are, quick, cheap and easy because, we don't want to expend effort. And I'm like, no, this is going to be effort. There's the effort that you put in to get the result, or there's the effort where you get to the point where you're like, I can't do this, and you just walk away. So, which effort do you want to put in? And it's not being unapologetic about, there's going to have to something put behind this. And there's going to be times that you don't like me, but like's a button on Facebook. You don't have to like me. I'm not your friend. I'm your coach.
Yeah. All right. And the going fast thing, I guess that disrupts things in the harbour just because you'll be making waves for other people who are trying to, I guess, access the same market. even if they're doing different things, because clearly you have a unique point of difference. So, but even though there's still other people in that harbour wanting to service those same people, so you would be upsetting them because you're making waves, very simply.
And also, when you stop people pleasing, people
Yeah.
are not pleased. So it does make waves.
Straight up. Yep. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I always remember someone I spoke to years ago, like she was like a motivational speaker, and she said to me one day, people are really funny when they don't get what they want. And when you're not attached to the outcome, you can actually see that. So it's really interesting. From your armchair, you can watch it on movies, and you can watch how people react to things when they don't get what they want. And then you see it happening in your own life. But when you're the cause of it, that can be quite confronting, can't it?
Oh, 100%. The other thing too, with people being in the harbour and, you know, other people wanting to serve the clientele and everything, I do a lot of podcast guesting, as you said earlier, and I was chatting to somebody recently about, you know, pitching podcasts and everything, and she's like, why do you pitch podcasts that are in your niche? Like, why do you know, that they're already serving your people? And I'm like, there is 8 billion people in the world. Like, I think there's something, and also the other thing to consider is people who buy coaching. People who read books buy books. Like, you know, it's not where this really.
All right, we just had a ever so slight interruption there. It's a bit of a worry when you're so reliant on internet and suddenly you don't have any. A bit of an interruption, and God forbid should we stop Suzanne while she's on a roll. So we're just going to backtrack a little bit. We were just talking about the fact that Suzanne does pitch to podcasts in the same harbour and to the same people. And she was talking about the fact that people who buy books, people who pay for coaching, and Suzanne was just going to explain to us where she was going with that. So it's all yours, darling.
Did the scrapbooking shop bit come through, or did we stop before that?
No, it was before.
Oh, we lost that. Okay, yeah, cool.
Hadn't even started.
So, I was on a real roll. So basically, I was saying that my dad used to run a mini lab, like for photo developing, back before digital took off.
Yes.
And when digital started to come in, his sales decreased because people were taking digital photos. And my sister came into the shop at that stage and she was like, I think we should start selling scrapbooking. And my dad's like, scrapbooking? What's that? And she's like, you know, you get stickers, you decorate photos. And my dad's like, well, that'll never sell. And it was really hard to sell when nobody knew what it was. And they were the first shop in Australia to start to really bring it in. Yeah. And then once people knew what scrapbooking was, it was flying off the shelves. Yeah, and then the mini lab totally left and they become a full service scrapbooking shop. And then surprisingly enough, Blockbuster closed and they moved from the mini lab into the old Blockbuster building because they needed the size to see how it had grown. So my point with this is when something is popular, people want to know what it is. And when we fear competition, like I need to like hold on to my clients or like these are my people, and we have this kind of weird competitive thing, we lose track of the fact that there's like 8 billion people in the world, and sometimes they want this flavor and sometimes they want that flavor, and people who like it buy it in general and they know more about it, and then they're talking about it and they're telling others. So when we're thinking about like, let's go on the harbour, and sometimes you're going to go for a spin and, you know, Suze's jet boat, and other times you're going to go for a leisurely cruise on someone else's, you know, maxi like yacht or whatever. Yeah. It's just we're all a rising tide lifts all ships rather than us having to just hide and cultivate exactly what we have. So I think of it more as niche mates. I got that term from George Cal.
Nice. Niche mates.
I have niche mates. I don't have competition. And if sometimes people want to go and hang out over there, that's cool. That if it's a fit, they'll come back. And if it's not, that they won't. But rather than
us being so worried. And they were never going to work
worried,
with you if it's not a fit anyway, were they?
But also, too, when you think about it, they say, I don't know where I got this from, but say you have 100 people in your audience. 10 people will buy no matter what you sell because they just love you. 10 people will never buy anything. Some weird kind of, I don't know, thing happens there. And then 80 are kind of in the middle. So if they're not a fit for you, but they're a fit for someone else, and you have a podcast interview or a chat and you introduce them to them, then they will remember that. And then, you know, there is so much connection and things going forward when we have that pay it forward attitude, as opposed to this competition kind of weirdness.
I'm actually, I'm not really a believer in competition. You know, even getting back to, you know, I am what's unique about what I do. We all see things and we all bring different perceptions, different viewpoints to what we do, whatever it is we're delivering. So, and it's a bit like what you say, it's like flavors of ice cream. We are all different flavors. So from that point of view, there's no competition between strawberry and vanilla.
No,
at all. So I think it's a great way of looking at it, ice cream. So, all right, so let's sort of start. I would love to keep talking to you, and I think I would like to encourage everyone to actually get your book. I am a good way through it, and I'm really enjoying it. I didn't publish it, by the way, just for the record, but that doesn't mean it's not a damn good book. So
thank you.
Just might have been better if I'd published it. But, not
totally.
Better written. The story's great. The story is what matters. So, yeah, what from a business perspective? So just keeping in mind that we've got lots of small business people listening to this, all being well. What in your years of business, and maybe you've already talked about it, what would be the number one thing that you would offer in terms of gold to them?
You can help someone today, right now, exactly with what you have. You don't need to have a pretty website. You don't need to have letters after your name. You don't need to have a certification. Like whatever it is that you think that you need, you don't. And like, I'm not saying that you can help the entire world, but I don't think anybody can help the entire world.
No.
But the person that you're meant to help would benefit from your help right now. And when I very first started in business, like I was doing a coach training and I started a Facebook page and I was just documenting my own journey, and people would be like, oh, can I work with you? And that's literally my marketing plan in the very beginning. Nice. And I remember hiring my first business coach and going to their very first training, and they were saying, oh, people don't just ask, how can I work with you? And I was like, this has been my entire business until now. Yeah. And when we get stuck in calls to action and finding the right words, I'm not saying don't do those things, but don't let those things stop you from sharing your genius right now. Like something that to you is so obvious, to somebody else is really beneficial. Like I did a post the other day of all things of how to stop the @everyone tag so that you don't hate all the Facebook groups that you're in. Yeah. And I got so much response to that. Like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. It's very just helpful. Really basic. So whatever it is that you're doing, it is enough to help the person who is, you know, ready and looking for your help. And rather than getting stuck in, well, I don't have a website, or my website's not perfect, or I don't know my colors, or, you know, whatever else, you know, branding or whatever, just share in whatever. And the thing is, we've never been more accessible than we are now. You can literally create for free a Facebook account, an Instagram account, a TikTok. I've never quite got there. I'm not really going to dance, but apparently you can create great TikToks with no dancing. But nice. Whichever, and also I'd encourage, pick one platform and stick with that, because when you're across them all, there's just way too much spam for you to have to deal with.
Okay.
And and then
it's exhausting, I think.
Yeah. It is. You're just going from one to the other, responding to, you know, mostly spam. So pick that one that you actually like, the one that you hang out on, because chances are if you like it and you hang out there, then your people will be there too. Yeah,
that's true. Good tip. Love it. All right. So where can people find you? Where can they find your book?
So they can find me at my website, suzanneculberg.com, SuzanneCulberg, because no one gets it without it, or check out the show notes. I'm sure you put it in there. And if you live in Australia and you want a signed copy of my book, you can grab it on my website. Just make sure you give me your address and let me know, do you want it signed by my marketing team as well, aka my children? They love to sign them. And that actually, funny story, my son has autism and struggles with writing, and we couldn't get him to pick up a pencil ever. He just refused. And then someone once asked him for his autograph, and that was the motivation he needed. He learned to write amazing. So he could sign books. But let me know if you want it signed by me and or the marketing team. And otherwise, if not, or if you live elsewhere in the world, Amazon, Book Depository, basically Barnes and Noble, most of them have it.
Yeah,
so
just go online and search. And what's the name of it?
It's called The Beginning is Shit, an unapologetic weight loss memoir. But search Suzanne Culberg because, and this is also a tip for anybody who's writing their own book, if you put an apostrophe or an asterisk or an exclamation mark or something in your title, it might look amazing, but unless people type it exactly in, the search engines struggle to find it. So I did that because with shit in the title, some people wouldn't put it up because it's a swear word. But and then if you've got young children, they call it The Beginning is Bad Word, which is always entertaining.
Nice. Yeah, very cool. Look, I've loved chatting, and I am looking forward to sharing this with our audience and just sort of seeing where that goes. So I'm hoping that a few people will pick up the banner and come and find you and say hi and maybe read your book, because I think you've got lots to offer.
Thank you. Yes, please do say hello. Send me an email, info@suzanneculberg.com. I am all for emails. I do teach boundaries. I don't do DMs. DMs are for memes and reels. But other than that, email all the way. I'm old school.
Fabulous. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that's it for today's episode. And we'll be back again next week with another amazing small business person, be it author or not author. Either way, we'll see you soon.